The fitting room smelled like money and fear. Not the obvious kind of fear, the metallic taste of panic, the sourness of desperation. This was subtler. This was the fear of being seen. And I had learned years ago that the most powerful women in the world were often the most afraid of their own reflections. She stood 3 feet away from me, her black blazer draped over the velvet sofa like a shed skin. The silk blouse beneath was the color of bone, expensive, unforgiving, perfect. Her hands were at her sides, but I could see the tension in her fingers, the way they wanted to fidget with the top button of her collar. "You're staring, Miss Voss." I was adjusting the light. "You were staring." Her voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that had built an empire without ever raising its volume. "You have been staring since you walked through my door." I lowered my camera slowly. The Nikon felt warm against my palm, an extension of my hand, my eye, my intention. "You hired me to photograph you, Ms. Castellani. Looking is part of the job." "I hired you to photograph the clothes." She took one step closer. The dressing room lights were soft, golden, intimate, designed to flatter. But I could see the shadows beneath her eyes, the slight tremor in her jaw that she would never acknowledge. Not what they hide. I didn't step back. I never stepped back. That was my gift and my danger. I stayed still when powerful women moved toward me, and I let them feel the weight of their own momentum. "You're wrong," I said quietly. "You didn't hire me for the clothes. You hired me because Vittoria told you I know how to photograph women who are difficult to read." Her eyes, dark, assessing, older than her 40 years, held mine in the mirror behind her. The fitting room was spacious, larger than most apartments I'd lived in, but suddenly it felt like the only air in the room was the air between us. "And what do you read, Miss Voss? In this moment?" I lifted my camera, not to shoot, just to hide behind the mechanism of it, to give myself permission to look without mercy. "I read that you're standing in your own fitting room," I said, "wearing $5,000 of silk and wool, and you're wondering if any of it is actually yours." Something flickered, a crack in the marble. Then her hand was on my wrist, not gripping, just resting there, her thumb brushing the pulse point with terrifying precision. "Put the camera down," she whispered. I didn't. "Please," she added. And that was the first time I heard it. The ghost behind the empire. The woman who had built a fortress so high she'd forgotten where the door was. I lowered the camera, but I did not look away. Part 2. The call. The phone rang at 11:47 p.m. I was in my apartment in the East Village, surrounded by contact sheets and empty teacups, the orange glow of the street lamp painting my walls in shades of amber. My hands were stained with developer chemicals from an afternoon spent in the darkroom. Old habits, old comforts. Digital was my profession. Film was my confession. "Vittoria," I answered because only she called this late, and only when she had something she knew I couldn't refuse. "Dahlia." Her voice was smoke and velvet, the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years connecting artists with the people who could afford them. "I have a job. Private. Tonight." I looked at the clock. It's almost midnight. "The client prefers midnight." "Of course she does." I stood stretching, my back protesting from hours bent over the light table. Who is it? Silence. Then, Elena Castellani. I knew the name. Everyone in fashion knew the name, even those of us who operated at the edges of that world. Castellani Atelier. Founded 15 years ago in Milan, expanded to New York, Paris, Tokyo. The kind of brand that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. The kind of brand that dressed women who ran boardrooms in countries. Vittoria. She asked for you specifically, Vittoria interrupted. I told her about your work in Marrakech, the ambassador's wife, the way you captured her without making her soft, without making her less. That was different. That was exactly what Elena Castellani wants. I could hear Vittoria lighting a cigarette, the familiar scratch of the match. She's difficult, Dahlia. She's controlling. She's precise. She's used to obedience. She doesn't like questions. She doesn't like surprises. She built an empire on being unreadable, and now she needs to be read. For what? A campaign. Private, not for the public. For investors, perhaps. Or for herself. Vittoria exhaled. She wouldn't tell me. She doesn't tell anyone anything. Then why does she need a photographer? Because, Vittoria's voice dropped. I told her, you were the only person I knew who could photograph a woman who didn't want to be found. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. Auburn hair, tired eyes, the calm that had become my armor during a decade of watching other people's lives through glass. I was 32. I had photographed war zones and wedding feasts, politicians and poets. I had learned that the camera was a kind of honesty, that even the most guarded person revealed something in the moment they forgot they were being watched. But something in Vittoria's tone made me pause. Why me, Vittoria? Really? Because, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Elena Castellani is the most beautiful woman I've ever met, who has never been truly seen. And you, my dear, are the only photographer I know who sees through beauty instead of just capturing it. I looked at the clock again. Midnight. Text me the address. Part 3. The entrance. The boutique was located in Soho, on a street where the cobblestones had been imported from Europe, and the rent could have fed a small country. I arrived at 12:30, my camera bag heavy on my shoulder, my heart lighter than it should have been. The glass doors were dark, locked, but a single light burned inside. Golden, welcoming, dangerous. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again and the door opened. She didn't look like a CEO. Not at first. She looked like a woman who had been waiting in the dark for someone to arrive. Her hair was swept back in a style that probably took an hour to achieve and appeared effortless. Her makeup was perfect, not heavy, just present, like a promise. She wore a black blazer that fit her like armor, tailored to her shoulders, her waist, the architecture of her power. Ms. Voss, not a question, a statement. You're late. By 3 minutes, I said. I stopped for coffee. Midnight shoots require caffeine. Something almost like surprise flickered in her eyes. Most people apologized. Most people explained. I did neither. She stepped aside, and I entered her kingdom. The showroom was exactly what I expected, and nothing like what I expected. marble floors that reflected the soft overhead lighting like a lake at dusk, mannequins dressed in clothes that cost more than my car, racks of couture arranged by color, by texture, by intention, velvet seating in corners where clients could sit and pretend to consider purchases they had already decided to make. But it was the mirrors that caught me. They were everywhere, floor to ceiling, antique, modern, framed in gold and steel. The room was a hall of reflections, and in every reflection, Elena Castellani stood watching me. "Beautiful space," I said. "It's a cage," she replied. "I just happen to own the key." She walked toward the center of the room, and I followed, my boots clicking against marble. She moved like she was being watched even when she wasn't. Straight spine, measured steps, every gesture calculated for maximum effect. "I need campaign images," she said, not turning around. "For a private presentation. Investors, they need to see the brand. They need to see continuity." Continuity? That I am still in control, that Castellani Atelier is still my vision, that nothing has changed. She turned, and her eyes were sharp as scalpels. "Can you do that, Miss Voss? Can you photograph control?" I set down my bag, opened it, lifted my Nikon, felt its weight, its truth. "I can photograph what you give me," I said. "But I don't pose my subjects, Ms. Castellani. I find them. And if I don't want to be found." I looked at her through the viewfinder. She was even more striking framed in glass. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile genuinely years ago. "Then this will be a very short night," I said. She stared at me. The silence stretched, elastic, tense. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. Not a social laugh, not a performance. A real laugh, short and surprised, as if she had forgotten she could make that sound. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," I replied. "You look tired." The laughter died. The wall went back up. But I had seen it, the crack, the real woman peeking through the marble. "Set up your equipment," she commanded. "We begin in 5 minutes." Part 4. The First Conflict. She posed like she had been trained by the best. Shoulder back, chin slightly lifted, hands positioned to show the cut of the blazer without drawing attention to themselves. She was a master of her own image, and that was the problem. I shot 2 frames, 3, 5. They were beautiful. They were dead. "Stop," I said. She didn't move. "Excuse me." "Stop posing. You're performing, and I can see every calculation." Her jaw tightened. "I am giving you what you need. You're giving me what you think I want." I lowered my camera. "You're giving me the magazine cover, the investor report, the woman who never sleeps and never doubts. And I'm not interested in her. You were hired to—" "I was hired to photograph Elena Castellani," I interrupted, and I watched her eyes widen at the sound of her own name. Not the brand, not the CEO, the woman who built something so perfect she's trapped inside it. "How dare you—" "Look at the mirror." She turned, automatically, conditioned to check her appearance. And I saw it, the moment she caught her own reflection and saw what I saw, the exhaustion, the loneliness, the empire builder who couldn't remember the last time someone touched her without wanting something. You look like you're selling something you don't believe in anymore, I said quietly. Her hand went to her throat, to the silk blouse, to the pulse that was probably racing beneath her composed exterior. Turn around, I commanded. She did, surprised by her own obedience, perhaps, or just tired of fighting. Don't pose, I said. Just stand there. Let me see you. I don't know how to do that. Yes, you do. You did it when you laughed. She looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the woman behind the company. The fear, the hunger, the desperate need to be seen, and the terror of what would happen if she was. I lifted my camera, and I shot. Part 5, the first crack. We worked for an hour in the showroom. She was professional, precise. She followed my directions with the discipline of someone who had spent her life meeting expectations. But she never relaxed, never dropped the performance. Until the mirror. It was an antique thing, gilt-edged, positioned near the dressing area where clients tried on gowns worth more than most people's monthly rent. She had moved toward it to adjust her blazer, and I had raised my camera instinctively, catching her in the glass. In the reflection, she wasn't looking at herself. She was looking at me. And her expression? God, her expression? It wasn't desire, not exactly. It was recognition. The look of someone who had been alone in a crowd for so long that they'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen by another human being. I shot 3 frames before she noticed. When she turned, her face was composed again, but her hands were shaking, just slightly, just enough. Delete those, she said. No. Dahlia? She stopped, surprised by her own use of my first name. Miss Voss, those aren't for the campaign. I know. They're personal. I know. She walked toward me, and I held my ground. She stopped inches away, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and old, jasmine and amber, the kind of scent that lived in clothes for years. Why? She whispered. Because that's the real you, I said. And I'm tired of photographing the mask. She reached out. Her hand hovered near my camera, not touching, just present. I could see her weighing something, power and vulnerability, control and surrender. The fitting room, she said suddenly. I want to move to the fitting room. I need different light. She didn't need different light. She needed walls. She needed a door that could close. She needed to be somewhere that felt safe enough to crack. I nodded and followed her into the heart of her fortress. Part 6. The fitting room. It was larger than my apartment. The private fitting room of Elena Castellani was a study in intimate luxury. Full-length mirrors on 3 walls, soft dressing room lights that could be adjusted to flatter any skin tone. A velvet sofa in deep burgundy, a changing screen with hand-painted silk panels, racks of clothes arranged by season and collection, silk hangers whispering against each other in the air-conditioned quiet. And the door. Heavy oak, lockable. The kind of door that said, what happens here stays here. She walked to the center of the room and stood there like a general surveying a battlefield. I need one final set, she said, her back to me. Something for the presentation, something that shows evolution. Evolution? The brand is changing. She turned, and her hands were at her blazer, unbuttoning it with mechanical precision. I am changing. The investors need to see that I'm still relevant, that I still understand what women want. She removed the blazer, draped it over the sofa. Beneath, the silk blouse caught the light like liquid bone. What do women want, Ms. Castellani? She looked at me, and for a moment, her composure faltered. I don't know anymore. I used to know. I used to be the woman who knew what every woman wanted to wear to feel powerful. Now I look in the mirror and I see. She stopped. What? Nothing. She lied. I see nothing. I moved to adjust the lights, not because they needed adjusting, but because I needed to move, to do something with my hands while my heart hammered against my ribs. Sit on the sofa, I said. She did, graceful, controlled, her knees together, her hands folded, every inch the CEO, even in her own private sanctuary. I didn't raise my camera yet. I just looked at her. What? She asked, defensive. You're still posing. I'm sitting. You're performing sitting. I walked closer. Your shoulders are back because you think it makes you look smaller. Your hands are folded because you don't know what to do with them when they're not holding something. You're wearing $5,000 of silk and you're uncomfortable in your own skin. And you think you can fix that with a camera? I think I can show you what you look like when you stop trying. She stood. Suddenly, the movement sharp, angry, desperate. You don't understand anything, she said, her voice finally rising, finally cracking. You stand there with your camera, and you're calm, and you're seeing, and you think you understand power. You think you understand what it costs to build something that people believe in. I think I understand loneliness, I said quietly. She stopped, breathing hard, her silk blouse rising and falling with the force of her breath. I built this, she whispered, gesturing at the room, the clothes, the empire. I built all of it, and I wake up every morning in an apartment that looks like a showroom. I eat breakfast alone at a table designed for 12. I go to bed wearing pajamas that cost more than most people's rent. And I stare at the ceiling, wondering if anyone would notice if I stopped existing. The silence was absolute. I photograph powerful women, I said, and the most powerful ones are always the loneliest because they've convinced the world they don't need anyone. And eventually, the world believed them. She looked at me and her eyes were wet, not crying, just present, here, real. Take the photograph, she whispered. I raised my camera, and for the first time that night, Elena Castellani didn't pose. Part 7. The measuring tape. We worked in silence for 20 minutes. She moved through the fitting room like it was a stage, and she was learning her blocking for the first time. Trying on different pieces from the racks, a cashmere coat, a silk dress, a blazer in midnight blue that made her eyes look like obsidian. But she kept returning to the black blazer. It's your armor, I said, shooting as she held it in her hands, examining the lining. It's my uniform. Uniforms hide things. Uniforms are things. She looked at me. This blazer has been in every major meeting I've had for 5 years. It was with me when I signed the Tokyo deal, when I fired my creative director, when I... She stopped. When you what? She didn't answer. She just put the blazer on, buttoned it, but her fingers fumbled. The buttons slipped. Let me, I said, before I could stop myself. I crossed the space between us, took the fabric in my hands. The blazer was soft, heavy, expensive, but beneath it I could feel her shaking. My fingers brushed hers as I guided the button through the hole. Once, twice, 3 times. You have steady hands, she whispered. I've spent 10 years holding cameras. And before that, I looked up. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, the slight asymmetry of her eyebrows, the place where her makeup stopped and her real skin began. Before that, I said, I was learning how to be invisible. You're not invisible. Neither are you. She reached up. Her hand touched my hair. Just a strand caught on my shoulder, her fingers brushing my collarbone as she freed it. The touch was electric, terrifying, intimate in a way that made my breath catch. You're photographing me wrong, she said softly. How should I photograph you? As someone who wants something. I lowered my hands from her blazer, stepped back, but not far, never far. What do you want, Elena? She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were focused on something I couldn't see, something in the past. I want, she said slowly, to wear something that doesn't feel like a costume. I want to stand in front of a mirror and see someone I recognize. She looked at me. I want to be seen by someone who isn't trying to get something from me. I'm trying to get a photograph. No, she shook her head. You're trying to get the truth. And I don't know if I have any left. I lifted my camera, framed her in the glass. Not the CEO, not the founder, not the woman in the magazine, just Elena, tired, beautiful, terrified of her own reflection. Look at me, I said, not the camera. Me? She did. And I shot. The sound of the shutter was loud in the quiet room. A commitment, a promise. Again, she whispered. I shot again, and again. And with each frame, she softened, not becoming less, becoming more. The armor cracking, the woman emerging, until she reached for the measuring tape. It was on the dressing table, silver and professional, the tool of 1,000 fittings. She picked it up and held it like a question. Measure me, she said. Elena, I want you to see my dimensions, my proportions, the exact specifications of what I've built. She held out the tape. I want you to know exactly what you're looking at. I took the tape. My hands were steady, but my heart was thunder. Arms out, I said. She extended them. The silk blouse pulled across her shoulders, revealing the line of her collarbones, the hollow of her throat. I wrapped the tape around her chest, not touching, just measuring. Professional. But my fingers brushed the silk and I felt her inhale sharply. 34, I said, my voice rough. Again. I measured again. This time, my fingers lingered. She didn't pull away. 34, I repeated. And my waist? I moved the tape lower. My hands were at her sides, my arms encircling her without touching. The tape the only thing connecting us. I could smell her perfume. I could hear her breathing. 26, I whispered. And if I told you those numbers mean nothing. I looked up, our faces were close. The mirror behind her reflected us both. Her in her silk and armor, me in my black shirt and jeans, the measuring tape a silver thread between us. I'd say you're finally telling the truth. She took the tape from my hands, let it fall to the floor with a soft clatter. Then her hands were on my shoulders and she was pulling me closer, and I was letting her, and the space between us was disappearing. You're dangerous, she whispered. I'm patient. I don't know how to do this. Then don't do anything, I said. Just stand there and let me see you. Part 8. The reveal. We didn't kiss, not then. The moment stretched, elastic, tense, and neither of us broke it. There was too much at stake, the power between us, the vulnerability we were both negotiating, the understanding that once we crossed that line, everything would change. She stepped back first, turned to the mirror, looked at herself, really looked, and I saw the grief in her eyes. My mother built the first atelier, she said suddenly. In Milan, she was a seamstress. She made wedding dresses for women who would never be as happy as they looked in her gowns. I lowered my camera. This was the story. This was what she had been hiding behind the marble and the silk. She died when I was 25, Elena continued. Cancer. Fast. She never saw the brand, never saw what I built from her sewing machine and her dreams. Is that why you built it? For her? I built it to prove I was worth something. She touched the mirror, her fingers leaving prints on the glass. She always loved my older sister more. Claudia was softer, kinder. She wanted children and a garden and a life that looked like a painting. I wanted this. She gestured at the fitting room, the empire, the weight of it all. And now I have it, and I don't know who I am without it. I moved to stand beside her, our reflections side by side, her in her polished perfection, me in my photographer's black, both of us looking for something we couldn't name. When I was in Marrakesh, I said, I photographed the ambassador's wife. She was 60 years old, powerful, feared, and she told me that the hardest part of being strong was forgetting how to be soft. Did you believe her? I believed that she was lonely, like you are. Elena turned to face me. And are you lonely, Dahlia? I travel too much to put down roots. I see beautiful things and I capture them, and I leave before they can capture me. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. We're not so different. We both hide behind our work. But you see people, truly see them, and you clothe them, give them armor to face the world. She reached out, touched my face, just a brush of her thumb against my cheekbone, but it felt like a brand. Stay tonight, she whispered. Not for the shoot, just stay. For the silence, for the presence. The boutique opens in 5 hours. Her hand dropped, but her eyes didn't leave mine. 5 hours until the world comes back, until I'm Elena Castellani again. Just 5 hours of being someone else with you. I should have said no. I should have packed my equipment and walked out into the New York night and kept my professional distance and never looked back. But I was 32 years old, and I was tired of leaving before I could be captured. "Show me the clothes," I said. "The ones you never wear, the ones that aren't for the brand." She smiled, not the CEO smile, the real one, small and tentative and young. "There's a dress," she said. "In the back. My mother made it. For my sister's wedding. Claudia never wore it. She chose something else. Something designer. I kept it." "Show me." She moved to the far rack, the one in the corner, the one that looked like it held ghosts. She pulled out a garment bag and unzipped it with trembling fingers. The dress was simple. Ivory silk, vintage cut, no label. It looked like it belonged to another era, another woman, another life. "Put it on," I said. "I haven't." "Put it on." She took the dress behind the silk screen. I heard fabric rustling, silk sliding against skin. I heard her breathing, unsteady, afraid. When she emerged, she was transformed, not into the CEO, not into the founder, into something simpler, something closer to who she might have been if the world hadn't demanded she become someone else. The dress fit her perfectly. It caught the light like memory, like hope, like the ghost of a woman who had once believed in happy endings. "Look," I said, guiding her to the mirror. She looked, and for the first time that night, Elena Castellani didn't see an empire. She saw herself. Part 9. The almost. We stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Her in her mother's dress, me in my photographer's black, the fitting room lights soft around us like a blessing. The dress changed her, not because it was expensive, though it was in its way, but because it was real, because it connected her to something older than the brand, older than the empire, older than the armor. "Take the photograph," she whispered. I raised my camera, but I didn't shoot immediately. I waited for her to relax, to breathe, to become present in her own skin. "You're beautiful," I said. "Don't." "Why?" "Because when you say it, I believe it, and I don't know what to do with that." I lowered the camera, stepped closer, close enough that I could see the pulse in her throat, the way her hands wanted to reach for me, but didn't dare. "What do you see?" she asked. "When you look at me, really look." I considered the question. She deserved honesty. She had spent her life surrounded by people who told her what she wanted to hear. "I see a woman who built a fortress so high she forgot where the door was," I said. "I see someone who is terrified of being soft because she thinks softness is weakness. I see." I reached out, touched the silk of her dress, the place over her heart. "I see someone who wants to be loved for who she is." not what she built. Her breath caught. And who is she? Who am I, Dahlia? You're still becoming, I said. You're not finished. And that's not a flaw. It's a promise. She moved first, or I did, or we moved together, the distance between us closing like a shutter, like a heartbeat, like the inevitable. Her hand was on my neck. My hand was at her waist. Our faces were inches apart, breath mingling, and I could taste her, jasmine and fear and something sweeter, something like hope. Don't make me soft, she whispered. I don't think softness is what you're afraid of. What am I afraid of? Being known, being seen, being caught. Her eyes searched mine, looking for deception, for agenda, for the catch. But I had no catch. I had only this, my camera, my patience, my willingness to stay. I want to kiss you, she said, but if I do, everything changes. Everything already changed, I replied. The moment you let me measure your waist, the moment you laughed, the moment you put on your mother's dress. She closed her eyes, leaned forward. I felt her breath on my lips, warm and unsteady. Dahlia. Yes, don't leave. When the sun comes up, don't leave. I didn't answer with words. I answered with my hand at her cheek, my thumb brushing her jaw, my presence steady and unwavering. We stood like that for a long time, the almost kiss stretching between us like a promise, like a question neither of us was ready to answer. And then the alarm sounded, not a real alarm. The clock on the wall, soft and electronic, marking 5 a.m., the hour when night ends and day begins, the hour when Elena Castellani would have to become herself again. She stepped back, the spell broken, the moment held in amber, suspended, unfinished. The boutique opens in an hour, she said, her voice steady again, controlled. I need to change. I nodded, stepped back, picked up my camera, my bag, my professional distance, but I took one final photograph before I left the fitting room. Her in the dress, standing by the mirror, looking at me with an expression I couldn't name and would never forget. The private frame. The morning after, I delivered the campaign images 3 days later. They were perfect. The investors would see exactly what they needed to see. Elena Castellani, powerful, controlled, the embodiment of her brand. She stood in the black blazer, in the silk blouse, in the fitting room light, and she looked like a woman who had never doubted herself for a single moment. But that wasn't the image I kept. The image I kept was the one from the end. The one of her in her mother's dress, standing by the mirror, looking at me with her heart in her eyes. The one where she wasn't Elena Castellani, CEO. She was just Elena, tired, beautiful, becoming. I printed it on film, developed it myself in my darkroom, the red light bathing my small apartment in shades of amber. I didn't put it in my portfolio. I didn't show it to Vittoria. I didn't even frame it. I just kept it in a drawer where I could look at it sometimes and remember that for 5 hours in a Soho fitting room, I had seen the real woman behind the empire. And she had seen me. 2 weeks later, I received a package, no return address, heavy, expensive paper. Inside, a single photograph and a note. The photograph was of me, taken when I wasn't looking, my head bent over my camera, my auburn hair catching the light, a small smile on my face I didn't remember wearing. She must have taken it with her phone, quickly, secretly, while I was adjusting the lights or changing a lens. The note said, "The boutique opens every morning at 10, but the fitting room door is always unlocked for you." I held the photograph for a long time, looked at the woman I was in her eyes, calm, patient, present, the woman who saw. Then I opened my drawer, took out the image of her in the white dress, placed them side by side. 2 women seen, 2 women known, 2 women becoming. I picked up my phone, typed a message. "I don't have another shoot until Thursday." The reply came 3 minutes later. "The light in the fitting room is best at midnight." I smiled, packed my camera, and went to find out what we would become together.